Oh, look at this! New studio, same dummy. Yes, welcome to Canadian Politics for Dummies, coming to you from what appears to be a very professional, very expensive, totally real television studio. That is 100% not just my home office with better lighting. So tonight we're talking about something that you've definitely seen online at Christmas dinner and in the comment section under literally any CBC article, the Dunning-Kruger effect, also known as why your loudest uncle is somehow wrong in surround sound. So what is the Dunning-Kruger effect? It's a cognitive bias where people who are bad at something don't just do badly, they're also weirdly confident that they're crushing it. In other words, you're not just wrong, you're wrong and smug. The term comes from two psychologists, David Dunning and Justin Kruger, who in 1999 did a series of studies where they tested people on things like logic, grammar, and figuring out what jokes are funny. Then they asked the participants how well they thought they had done. People in the bottom chunk, the worst performers, massively overestimated how good they were. They thought they were above average, which is impressive because statistically that is not how averages work. Meanwhile, the top performers were actually pretty accurate or even a little modest because they tended to assume, well, if it's this easy for me, it must be easy for everyone. So the Dunning-Kruger effect is basically the less you know, the more likely you are to think you know a lot. And the more you know, the easier it is to see how much you still don't know. Or in internet terms, stage one is, I watched one YouTube video and now I'm an expert, where stage two is, oh no, there's books. You may have seen some version of this meme. Confidence on one side, actual skill on the other. At the beginning, when you know almost nothing, your confidence skyrockets. This peak is sometimes called Mount Stupid. Then, as you learn more, your confidence crashes into the Valley of Humility. And slowly, as you keep learning, you crawl up the slope of, okay, I kind of get it now. Now, technically, statisticians argue that the exact curve is more complicated, and some of it can be explained by boring things like the regression to the mean and generic overconfidence. But the basic idea holds up. People often don't know enough to realize how little they know, especially at the low end. In normal life, this shows up as the guy who's terrible at pool but insists on coaching your stance like he's on the pro tour while he's missing every second ball. The coworker who has used Excel exactly once and now offers to fix the budget model. The podcast bro who read half of one pop psychology book and is suddenly Joe Rogan meets Freud. So why does this matter for politics? Politics is the perfect storm for Dunning-Kruger because it's insanely complicated, policies, economics, history, law, but it feels simple because everyone has emotions, vibes, and a Facebook account. That gap between this feels simple and this is actually complex is where the Dunning-Kruger effect moves in, pays rent, and starts a podcast about how Trudeau personally causes inflation because of his socks or something to that effect. And yes, people across the political spectrum are affected, left, right, center, or whatever weird horseshoe you identify as. But for this episode, we are going to talk about a particular pattern that seems especially loud on the right and the far right. Not because people on the right are uniquely dumb, they're not, but because a certain style of right-wing politics rewards absolute certainty with minimal knowledge. It's a feature, not a bug. Let's examine one of the more charming lines you'll see floating around. Being a liberal is a mental disorder. Now, as a sentence, this does a lot. It medicalizes disagreement, it dehumanizes millions of people, and it manages to misunderstand both politics and mental health at the same time. That is efficient. This is Dunning-Kruger in full bloom. 1, massive confidence. I know what's wrong with half the country, and it's a diagnosis. And 2, minimal knowledge. No understanding of how mental disorders actually work, how political ideologies form, or even the basic history of liberalism, or conservatism for that matter. It's like going to a doctor and saying, yeah, I googled headache once. Pretty sure every problem in your body is just migraines. All of them. Broken leg? Migraines. The fact that this liberalism is a mental disorder line gets repeated so often and so confidently is a textbook case of people talking way outside their lane while thinking they're in the VIP section. Now again, Dunning-Kruger is not an exclusively right-wing thing. Left-wing people can be smugly wrong too, but there are some features of the modern right, especially the farther right that you go, that make this bias particularly visible. 1, mistrust of expertise. Like if you start from an experts are lying to you, then the only things left to trust are your gut, your favorite pundit, and the meme your cousin Brandon posted at 2 a.m. That is basically an open bar for Dunning-Kruger. 2. Media ecosystems that reward outrage over nuance. The more confidently you yell, the more clicks and views you get. I'm 5% sure about this and open to learning more does not outperform I know the truth and everyone else is a sheep when you look at the actual algorithm. And 3. Simple stories for complex problems. It is so much easier to say crime is up because liberals are soft than to learn about poverty, demographics, policing, and social policy. Simplicity feels powerful when you don't see the missing pieces. Take those 3 ingredients, mistrust of experts, outrage media, and oversimplified stories, and you get a perfect environment where people can be deeply misinformed and yet be absolutely sure they're right. That's Dunning-Kruger dressed up as patriotism. Now, to be fair, the Dunning-Kruger effect is one of the most memed concepts in psychology, and sometimes people oversell it. Some researchers have pointed out that part of the pattern can be explained by basic statistics and generic overconfidence. Not every overconfident idiot is a pure Dunning-Kruger case. Sometimes they're just regular overconfident idiots. But the core idea is solid. Accurately judging your own skill requires a certain minimum level of skill in the first place. You need enough knowledge to even know what you don't know. That's called metacognition. Thinking about your own thinking. And metacognition is basically kryptonite for the kind of politics that depends on. I don't need to understand climate science, the economy, or the Constitution because I have vibes. You might be thinking, okay, but that sounds like American politics. First of all, yes, obviously. But Canada is not immune. You can see the Dunning-Kruger in people who yell communist at a carbon tax while being unable to define either communist or tax. Or folks who scream dictator because they had to wear a mask at a superstore while happily using a phone that legally tracks their location. It's present in conspiracy theories about everything from the gun control to immigration to central bank digital currencies, where a complicated policy becomes globalist takeover in 3 Facebook shares or less. Every time someone in my comments says globalist in a negative way, I know that Dunning-Kruger is a very likely cause. The common theme is that the less someone actually understands the policy details, the more certain their hot take tends to be. So how do you avoid becoming a walking Dunning-Kruger meme? A few simple habits will help. Number 1, ask yourself, could I be wrong? That little question is like a fire alarm for your brain. If you can't even imagine being wrong, that's a red flag. 2, check how much you've actually studied the thing you're loud about. 1 article and 2 TikToks does not a policy expert make. Listen to people who know more than you, especially when you don't like what they're saying. That discomfort? That's often a sign you're bumping into the limits of your own knowledge, not the limits of reality. And 3, be suspicious of absolute certainty. If someone is 100% sure about a 0% simple problem, like the economy, climate change, or healthcare, maybe don't treat them as a prophet. This doesn't mean you can't have opinions. It just means that the louder and more absolute your opinion is, the more responsibility you have to actually know what you're talking about. So when you hear things like being a liberal is a mental disorder, or on the other side, all conservatives are brainwashed, or any other sweeping, dehumanizing nonsense, you don't have to shout back. You can just quietly think, Mount Stupid. Nice this time of year. And maybe if you're feeling brave, you can ask a very simple question. How much have you actually read about that? Because ultimately, the Dunning-Kruger effect is not just people I disagree with are dumb. It's a reminder that all of us are capable of being overconfident in things we don't understand. The challenge, especially in politics, is to build a culture where changing your mind, learning more, and saying, I don't know enough about this, is seen as a strength and not a weakness. In the meantime, yes, it disproportionately looks like some corners of the right are camping out on Mount Stupid and building condos. But the real solution is not to build Mount Stupid condos of our own. That's our show. If you have enjoyed this deep dive into why some people are so confidently wrong, hit like, subscribe, and share this with that one person in your life who has always said, being a liberal is a mental disorder. Ideally right before the family dinner, so that you can just press play and avoid that 3-hour argument. From the brand new, not at all fake Canadian Politics for Dummies studio, thanks for watching, and remember, the more you learn, the more you realize you're a dummy. And that's actually progress. See you next time, dummies.